Today I have the luxury of being joined by three industry experts, but first and foremost, three of our very good friends. Hello to three of you, and we wanted to say thank you for coming, traveling, and seeing us here in Montreal. We really appreciate it. And yeah, so before we kick things off, I think we can do a little roundtable and do a quick little introduction, and I think you're a better place to introduce yourself. So yeah, Jasper, why don't you start?
Yeah, sure. Of course, thanks for having us. It's always a pleasure to be here. So my name is Jasper Oosterveld. I'm from Amsterdam, the Netherlands, and I'm a Microsoft MVP and a modern workplace consultant for InSpark. And I focus on Microsoft Teams, SharePoint, OneDrive, and around that, topics like compliance and governance and adoption.
And I'm Marc Anderson. I'm president of Praxis Consulting. We're based in New England in the United States, but we're sort of a virtual organization, so we've been working from home longer than it was fashionable. And we focus almost entirely on Microsoft 365 or SharePoint on-prem, and try to make the platforms work best for the people who need to use them.
Hi, Maarten Eekels from the Netherlands as well. I'm CTO for Rapid Circle. We are a Microsoft partner, and we work from Australia, India, and the Netherlands. And we cover basically the whole world. I'm a Microsoft MVP, and that's it, I think.
So my name is Laurent St-Pierre, but everybody calls me Larry. Yeah, I'm a Partnerships and Alliances Manager here at ShareGate. Thanks for the quick intro. So I think, let's get into the questions if we're all ready.
I think it's very important for IT teams to kind of delegate self-service, right, to the business, because that's where you can get your efficiency from an IT team perspective, because basically most IT teams, they're just extinguishing fires instead of really helping the business to move forward and to make the business more efficient. And by bringing more of the responsibility to the business, and that's exactly what you're doing with that end user application.
And unfortunately, while they're extinguishing fires, they're also managing to stay in the way, right? So by giving end users those tools and we call it self-service sometimes, but it's really just let me do what I need to do.
Exactly.
Right? Get out of my way and let me have the tools that I need. And with a little bit of guardrails on the sides, IT can hopefully feel better about letting people do what they need to do and back off. Yeah. And you're right, working on the more high value added stuff that technology people should be focusing on, as opposed to arguing about whether somebody needs a team or something.
Yeah, it works both ways, right? So you create space on the IT team side for them to focus on more important things they can work on. But on the other hand, the end users, they have the idea that, hey, finally I can run this report myself, or I can request that team or create that team myself and using the right template. And I don't have to wait for 2 weeks until something happens, until I receive that report or that team. I think we've all done our very best in the past decades to the IT teams. Well, there's many organizations where I heard, they're called the Department of No, right?
Yeah,
and now finally, and we're trying to bring that back. We want to help the business, and this really helps.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think IT really needs to facilitate. That's what you said, that people just want to do their jobs. And IT needs to make sure they can do their jobs. So, they have employee empowerment. It's kind of like a marketing buzzword, but it is really important. Right? Because you know how you want to do your job, and IT can't know that. That's just impossible.
Yeah.
So they need to focus on other things.
Yeah. And I like you're saying, when you said like IT has been perceived for like the Department of No, I find it really interesting that users didn't necessarily appear to be frustrated. Quite the contrary. Like when IT was getting involved and enabling them, say like, hey, by the way, you have those links that are shared externally. It's like, oh wow, well thank you. Like I didn't know that. So there is value also in doing that. This way.
I always say I've been waiting for the sort of genesis of a new kind of IT for the last 35 years. It's bound to happen sooner or later. But that mindset of helping people do their jobs better, that seems like it's such an obvious idea, right?
Yeah.
But it just isn't always the thing that happens on a day-to-day basis. And I do think that the tool set that you've always had tool sets that have really enabled people to do their jobs better. Mm-hmm. And this will just bring more things to the fore for them to do their jobs better with less friction, less confusion. The interfaces that you build to do these things, to manage, sort of the corpus of existing teams and sites and stuff they make sense.
Yeah.
And they're very simple to follow and to generate that activity, whether it's an email reminder to somebody or it's I want to create a template or I want to ask a question
directly
or learn about something. Yeah. You make it very simple to do that.
That's a great point, because self-service is not a synonym for great UI or for easy or great user experience. And that's what I like. The app, again, you bring it to teams where people are working already anyway. Yeah. The UI is it's clear, it's very user-friendly, it's intuitive, exactly. And if you compare it with, for example, self-service password reset from Microsoft, which is no one knows where to go to actually do that, right?
Well, and you just need to want to use the app in the first place, right? If the experience is just bad, they're not going to come back.
Exactly. So I'm all in favor of self-service, but in user experience, it has to be easy as well, and it has to be intuitive as well.
Yeah. And I'm glad you're talking about like this. What's the word you use? This genesis of a new IT, because that's a good segue in my next question. So if we just take a step back a little bit and look at the state of cloud management and the role of IT leaders in that, how do you think the role of IT managers and IT leaders needs to evolve moving into this new IT era that we're referring to?
I think IT is still learning. With the cloud, how to trust their users. Mm-hmm. I don't think that they want to distrust their users, but it often comes off that way.
Yeah.
And so I think IT learning to give people the power that they need to get their jobs done with the kind of tools that you're offering now is better for everyone. And I do think that I tend to start framing pretty much everything in my mind these days with some of our thinking around the maturity model for Microsoft 365. But that applies to IT organizations as well. If they're only putting out fires and they're not sort of proactively thinking about how do we make people's lives easier, how do we give them better tools, how do we prevent them from going and using Dropbox or whatever else, because that has security implications. Let's keep people happy and in the fold. Then it's better for everybody instead of the sort of frantic let's worry about security thing that everybody does, which I know that you focus a lot on. A lot of the security problems are almost caused by IT because they put up all these walls and blockers and stuff.
Yeah.
We don't take away the steering wheel. Right, we still let them drive.
Yeah.
We just make sure it's safer.
Yeah, exactly.
And we teach them that the guardrails are there to help them not go over the cliff.
Yeah, so people try to maneuver around it.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons when we define a governance strategy, we always bring IT and the business together. So they both know from each other what's important, but what are our responsibilities, what we have to look towards to. And then that can also help prevent that issue of taking out fires and everything. Yeah.
You see more and more responsibility moving to the business side as well, right? So IT teams, they really should try to become more supportive of the organization and to focus more on the primary processes of organizations and help them become more efficient or innovative or whatever you want to call it. But that's, I think, super important. And business nowadays has the budgets. They have wishes. They would like to have something to happen. So either you empower them to do that themselves, or you help them. But it's about them, and it's not about the IT team anymore.
I can't wait for the day. This is another one of these days that's never going to come. when IT stops talking about the business and the business stops talking about IT.
Yeah,
By the way, you all work for the same organization.
That's very true.
You know, we don't say marketing and the business. We don't say finance and the business. IT has created this separation.
Little island. Yeah.
You know, you're all working on the same goals.
I think
so.
I think that in a not too far away future, I think it's more the COO who will be responsible for IT, no longer the CIO or even a lot of organizations CFO. The finance owns IT, or IT finally had its own place in the board, and we have a CIO now, or a chief digital officer. But I think that's moving towards the chief operational officer, because that's the person who owns the processes in an organization, and that's the person who needs IT for their processes to become as efficient as possible, and to have to stay ahead of the competition, to stay ahead of the curve. That's their job. So I really think that IT, the responsibility is moving to that side of the organization.
Yeah.
It has to. That will be the organizations that will survive.
Well, I'm keeping my fingers crossed that you're right.
But you also see this from Microsoft. Like I think I saw that shift when they released that whole modern SharePoint. Do you remember that? A while ago. That's when you also saw they're shifting more towards empowering business users.
That's where it started.
Yeah, that's when it kind of started, and I think then teams took it to the next level. But see how long it took them as well to kind of get there. So what you said, it will take time, but eventually I think we will get there. Yeah, and we need to be successful. Yeah.
What do you think created this kind of like divide, and what do you think needs to happen to kind of like bridge that gap, basically? Is there anything you think that IT teams can do?
I think they need to listen to the business. What is important for you? How can you do your job most efficiently and effectively? And then IT can think, okay, from my expertise, I know Microsoft 365, and this can help you to get your job done, for example. Yeah.
I think it sort of goes way back, though. You know, I always talk about the military-industrial complex. I just love that phrase. But you know, you had organizations that were very hierarchical, and then IT evolved from often finance organizations because they needed mechanization, they needed computation. And so the kinds of people who could understand the technologies were serious nerds. I was one of them. Historically, we've always been separated because of our techiness. And so I think that that's breaking down, but it's taken a really long time.
I think another reason is that you're absolutely right. And by the way, I think myself, no, I should rephrase that. My wife thinks I'm a nerd as well. So I guess I can relate to that.
We're nerds to everybody who isn't one of us.
But another reason why I think that gap is there is IT didn't try to improve the primary processes. So whenever IT came around, suddenly everybody was asked to do their work differently, and everybody was like, but why? Because we were doing our jobs and it worked the way that we did, right? So why do I have to start using this new weird application? I don't know what it is. I don't know how to use it. It complicates my work. I need to learn new things that I'm absolutely not willing to. I don't have time for it, etc. And nowadays, I think especially younger people, the digital dexterity of people that's super important. And I think IT leaders should also try to focus on that, because if you want IT to become really a part of the organization and part of your delivery processes and of your primary processes, then the world is ever changing, and especially the digital world, and the pace is not slowing down. It's only picking up. It's really important that IT leaders they see that this is required for the organization, because then you don't have to focus anymore on why do I need to use this application. Then you can bring in another application, and because the digital dexterity is on a high level, they understand it, and you need to focus less on why this or why did the button move from the left side to the right side of the screen. So I think that's also really important.
Yeah, that's why, for example, when we have like a huge adoption change management strategy, and you see that people work there don't even really have like an IT background like us. And I think that's in their advantage, because then there's easier for them to make that translation from technology to the business people how to use it. Because maybe if you're a really technical person, you keep approaching it from that point of view.
Yeah.
But they approach it from a different side, and I think that's really beneficial as well.
Yeah.
We're going way afield from your question.
That's perfect. That's fine. That's why we're just chatting.
One thing that I find very interesting is everyone says, "Oh, but the young people, they can all use all technologies at all times in any lighting," and it's just not true.
No.
Digital dexterity isn't the same thing as digital prowess,
Exactly.
right?
Yep.
My son is a really smart guy, but he doesn't understand computers. You know, he can use his phone like a madman, but he doesn't know how it works.
Yeah.
And does he need to? No, not really. But there's this assumption that younger people are one way and older people are another way. And it's not that.
Yeah.
It's everybody in every age has a different set of skills. So we should be aiming at the people who need the most assistance.
Yep.
Your user interface, and bring it back around to you. But your user interfaces have always done that. We need to understand that there are people without digital prowess. There are people who just don't understand, like, why does this happen when I push this button? And we have to understand the culture in the organization we're working within or for, and aim everything at that. And it's not coming at it from the technical view. Like you said, it's coming at it from the empowerment view, the outcomes. Let's make sure we're focusing on what we want people to get to, not how we think it ought to go step by step.
I agree.
Sorry, I'm rambling a little bit there, but
No, that's fine. But I want to touch a little bit. I'm hearing you talking. We're still kind of talking about that divide, where it comes from and where it's headed, and the reasons that kind of like explain that. I want to touch a little bit about on employee experience, which has already became kind of like a buzzword already at some point. But it's something we've heard a lot, like almost kind of more of like on the HR side, it's employee experience. But now we see this kind of like concept that's being very, very prevalent and just kind of taking place on the IT side as well. So what do you, how do you feel that's going to have impact on the way IT work, and maybe even perhaps in kind of like bridging that gap to some extent?
Yeah, to some extent, definitely. I think, yes, you're right, it's a buzzword. I do think, though, that organizations should focus more on making it easier for their coworkers to embrace what we have to offer in terms of technology.
Yeah.
And if that's what you mean with an employee experience platform, then I'm very happy with it. And yes, we should focus on it. But the definition is already something that we can discuss for hours on, probably, because there's also I also meet customers. We would really like a digital experience platform for our employees. Okay, what are you looking for? Yeah, new intranet. Okay, well, that's...
They're basically looking to offer a better employee experience just through better quality technology, essentially.
I think
that's where it ties into IT a little bit, right?
Exactly. So make it easier and understandable where they can find their things and how they can use it. I think that's what an employee experience platform is about. And it makes sense to try to bring as much as possible to one location so that you have this one place to go to. But it doesn't have to be, as long as you're clear about where things are or how you can use them. Someone who works in healthcare in a hospital and is taking care of people in the hospitals and is beside the bed all the time, their primary focus is the electronic patient dossier, or I'm not sure what that's called in English properly, but that's where they do their thing. That's where they live. And the other things where they can send a message to the leadership team about how cool they think that things are running, or find a news article on the internet, that doesn't have their focus. So we really should think about how can we bring those two together then.
Yeah.
That's what I mean with employee experience.
When that employee experience phrase popped up, which to me was like out of nowhere. I'd never heard it until Viva came along. All of a sudden, that's the thing. We used to talk about building good UI, user interface. Then we started to talk about user experience, and now we're talking about employee experience. It's a progression of the same concepts, right? Mm-hmm. To me, user experience was about how do I feel at the end of doing something? And if I feel crappy, it was a bad user experience. IT is often offering a lot of really bad user experiences. Call the help desk. That's not always a good user experience, right? They're not actually helpful, and there's no desk. But
Virtual one.
Well, you want to think about, well, how are we solving people's problems? How are we, all of that is user experience. It's employee experience. An employee experience almost puts a fence around it too much, because some of them are going to be your vendors and your partners, and they're not employees. But anytime anybody interacts with you in any way, that experience ought to leave you with a positive feeling. Mm-hmm. And if it doesn't, that's bad, right? Yeah. And so I think that's the kind of thinking that every department in the business or in IT needs to be thinking about. How do people feel about working with us?
Exactly. It feels like employee experience is not, because now we're hearing about it in the IT space, but it feels like it's just that IT's role in employee experience has just become huge in the last years, right? Because technology is takes so much space in our day to day. IT is now out of a little bit out of the blue, has so much accountability in user experience, which used to be something more managed by HR and all departments, like you're saying. But now IT is really a key stakeholder more than ever in employee experience.
Employee experience is also about being inclusive. It's also about, and we're working from home more and more. So how we're going to make sure that people who join a meeting from home feel inclusive in a meeting with other people who are sitting around in the office here somewhere and around the table. So that's also employee experience. Yeah. And it's all about onboarding and offboarding. That's also employee experience. So it's a very broad topic.
Broad, yeah.
It is.
And there's a lot of angles that you can look at it. Yeah. And definitely IT is involved.
Well, it's interesting, because having known ShareGate and GSoft for so many years, there's been a long evolution of what the product sets do. Mm-hmm. And it's great to see ShareGate moving into more lifecycle management and more, sort of care and feeding, what I think of as care and feeding of what goes on in Microsoft 365, something that I've used the desktop tool for years, mm-hmm. and tried to convince you guys on some level, you got to push that part. It's not just a migration tool. Yeah. It's a sort of a suite of tools that help you manage your environment over time. And you're adding functionality that is going to just continue that move, right? With governance and provisioning and some sort of workflow management and cloud copy and all these things that you announced today. I think it's great to see that progression, mm-hmm. and it makes total sense to me.
It's like a natural evolution, I think, of what there is and where it's going.
Yeah.
It was very exciting for me. I love the energy. And that's what Marc says. It started with migration, it's just evolving into a whole life cycle management application tool service. Yeah, I thought it was great. Yeah.
You're trying to make life easier.
Yeah,
I think that's really that was the key point.
That's always what we've tried to be doing, right?
Yeah.
It's in different ways over the years, but you're right. That is the focus.
Management of Microsoft 365. There is no one place to rule them all, right? There's so many places where you have to go. Mm. There's so many changes that you have to keep up to date with, and giving you one place, one tool where you can do reports, because that's also something that I really like that ShareGate does really well. At least it gives you insight in, okay, what should I take action on? Mm-hmm. And that's really hard to find. And you can create your own scripts that create your own reports, but then the reports are only there for you, and they're not available to anyone, or you have to change that somehow, but it's difficult, and then Microsoft changes something in the command list and your script doesn't work anymore, and you have to take care of that, and so it's cumbersome.
It can become a full-time job for you.
So use a tool, and you can focus on the fun stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, it's exactly the guest review, for example. As IT, you can go manually to your AD, but how do you know which person should stay or should go? It's something that the person who invited the guest or shared the file, he or she should decide that. So tools like ShareGate just make lives a lot easier. Yeah, it sounds cliche, but it is true.
Well, it's streamlining the repetitive
it's more
stuff,
efficient,
and because it's configurable, it's the stuff that matters to your organization.
That as well.
My colleague Todd Clint and I go back and forth on this sometimes. It's like, he'll say, "How can the client will ask us for something?" And he'll say, well, I can write PowerShell to do that. And I'm like, yeah, but I can get ShareGate to do that. And I know I'm going to be faster than you are.
Exactly.
And then we have a little challenge. and ShareGate usually wins.
All right, good.
But that matters, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's that ease of use, that simplification of the things that you do all the time or regularly or matter the most to the organization, and you're laying down some great tools for that.
Yeah, we see it with migrations, and now it's just evolving into like more management, lifecycle management.
Yep.
I love PowerShell too, but for reporting, I think there are easier ways to get your reports out of your tenant, and ShareGate is definitely one of the better options. Yeah.
Great, that was awesome.
Can we do it again? The questions? I want to do the questions.
You ready to start the questions again?
I got better answers now.